Hello, welcome to Women's Financial Empowerment Group. I'm your host, Ruth Agbeloso. Thank you so much for visiting my channel. If this is your first time, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. And if you've been here before, thank you so much. Please like, share, do all those wonderful things. Oh, and hit the notification bell. That way you'll know whenever I upload a new video.
I am a financial coach, and on this channel we talk about all things financial. So if you think you might be in need of a financial coach or a financial consultant, please go ahead and see my information in the description box, and let's figure out whether we'd be a good fit to work together.
In today's video, I'm going to be interviewing a longtime friend of mine. She has a really great story of how just a simple act of checking her credit score changed her life. And I think you ought to hear this story because it's a very encouraging story. And ladies out there, especially single moms, be encouraged that just because you're having a rough situation right now doesn't mean you have to stay there, doesn't mean that that's going to be the end. You can get over on the other side. I hope you stay to the end to hear her story because it's amazing. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Sonia. Welcome, Sonia.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing all right, thanks. It's good to see you.
Yes, likewise, likewise. So I was just telling my viewers about you that you have a wonderful story to share. So before we get into your story, can you please just tell us who you are and maybe your occupation?
Okay. My name is Sonia, and I was born in Jamaica, raised in New York City, and later on moved to Georgia. And I am what they call a referral coordinator. I help to get patients that are getting ready to have bone marrow transplant, specifically cancer patients. I help to get them ready to start that process. So anything that is required in helping them to get an easy transition of that, that's what I do.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Usually when I interview people in this manner, it's a debt freedom story, and they have tons of debt that they worked through and paid down. But your story is just a little bit different because you didn't have as much debt, but it's still a very impactful story. So I just am excited to hear you share your story today. So without further ado, can you just tell us, first of all, how much debt you were in and what happened?
Okay. In total, all the debt that I had was just about $10,000. I don't remember the exact number, but it was just about $10,000. But the issue that I had was not the amount of debt. It was the fact that I was terrified of checking my credit and looking at anything that could possibly get me into a different financial situation. I've gotten so accustomed to hearing no when it comes to things like as a single mother, because I'm a single mother, we fell into hard times. And one of the unfortunate things about poverty is a lot of times when you attempt to come out of it, you end up falling in even more debt. So I listened to a lot of different things that people said. I tried to get government assistance, and government assistance would always tell me no. For one reason or the other, I just never qualified. Then they told me to try to get credit cards. I tried to get credit cards. And of course, a reputable credit card company of a truth would say no, and they told me no because I just didn't have good credit. Later on, I discovered I had no credit. But you have those, I call them the scammers, where they'll be willing to give you $300 here, $200 there. The problem with that is you set yourself up by trying to get that and thinking you're going to pay something with it, and you'll be able to pay that because it's not such a big amount. But if you didn't have it in the first place, getting that card is not going to help you to get the means to pay for it. And so I ended up accumulating a lot of small debt that became big debt. with cards like that. Um, I got so accustomed to hearing no for pretty much everything that I tried that I started to just do other things um, in trying to make ends meet. It's a little hard because I was working full time and working a decent job, but when your bills outweigh your paycheck, it makes no difference. And so we could not afford to do quite a lot. I had to make the sacrifice of choosing not to eat just to make sure that we would always have money. Specifically, my boys would always have different things that would come up for school fees. And I am a mother that raised my children without any support. So there was no child support coming in. There was no government assistance. There wasn't that person I can ask and get, hands on. It was literally hand to mouth. And so we frequented the Goodwill stores. I would decide different times of the year to either go without gas or to go without heat. Um, you know, just every trick in the book that I could think of to try to make ends meet just to be able to feed them, my children. That's what I did. And so there were many nights where I went the entire day. There was no breakfast, there was no lunch, and there was no dinner to make sure that they were going to be able to eat.
I hear you saying that there were times when you didn't have enough to eat. So what about food stamps? Didn't you have an opportunity to get food stamps?
So that's the government assistance. I tried. Um, and I remember one time in particular, for 1 month, they agreed. And then just like that, they stopped. And I was never able to again. Yes.
Wow.
I don't even remember what the story was at the time, but it seemed like I was right at where they considered to be too much. You're making too much. So they want you to basically be begging in terms of your finances to approve you for it, but then you don't have an opportunity to do anything if you're not working. So it was a system that definitely did not help me. And so that's why I had to find other means in order to make sure that we went without. My hair is a really good example of that. It's over 4 feet, and
Wow.
people, I'm only 4'7", so go figure.
The visual.
So people see it, they're amazed, and there's a lot of wow. But the thing is, reason why it ended up growing so long is because I could not afford to go to the hair salon. So I had to find a way to do it myself. And father was good. It just kept right on growing.
Mm.
But times were not necessarily the easiest, but there were learning curves. They helped me to build a foundation, and I learned how to just live very simple and be content. The problem with the debt is that in my attempts at trying to get better jobs, because before this particular job, the jobs weren't so great. And so I tried to go to school thinking that that would help. But being a single mom and not having the resources, there wasn't always someone available when my children would need supervision. So I couldn't do both. I couldn't go to school and work and watch them and get their homework done, get them to bed on time. Even something as simple as dropping them off at school, there's a time frame for that that doesn't always match the time you have to start work. So I had to not finish school. And as a result, that's how the student loans became a thing. They weren't huge, but they were more than I could afford. Also, my debt wasn't huge, but when your paycheck does not match your debt, you have nothing. And so as a result, there was one year in particular, I would say it all started about 3 years ago. My eldest son got into some trouble. wrong place at the wrong time. And as a result, I had to find bail money that I did not have at the time. I owed on the rent. Thankfully, it was within the same month, but it was still, I owed the rent. And I had to find $2,500 to get him out of jail. And right at that time, it was the tax season. So I thought, okay, I'll do this. And then I'll file my taxes and we should hopefully catch up a little bit. Only for them to take my taxes to cover student loans.
So you're saying that they took your taxes?
Took my
Oh
taxes.
my gosh. And you were already not making that much money.
Correct.
And all of that just piled up at the same time.
At the same time.
Wow.
And so they took my taxes and I thought, okay, now I'm in trouble because I really don't have this money. I had even started, walking to work just so I wouldn't have to spend the money on MARTA. Well, that's our bus station here in Georgia, the transportation system. But and so I thought, okay, well, let me see what else I can do. Maybe I can do some overtime. And right after tax season, I got a call from Human Resources letting me know that my check was about to start being garnished, my wages.
Wow. What? So you're, hold on a second. Let me just make sure that I've got this right. So you were already not making that much money. You had this student loan debt, which you knew about, right? But you also had to bail your son out. Did you have a lawyer? You had to hire a lawyer or something like that too. On top of that, then they took your tax refund. So you didn't have that to rely on. You were late on your rent. And then they were going to garnish your income to your paycheck.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. How did you survive that?
It's a lot of tears, a lot of prayer. And again, pretty much starving myself. Emotionally, I tend to shut down whenever I get overwhelmed. And I internalize. So by that time I had killed my appetite. So even if I wanted to eat, I just couldn't digest it. But I just tried to find every odd job you could think of to do to try to compensate as best as I could. But by that time, I also stopped sleeping. It was just a bad situation getting worse very quickly. And so I basically spent a year with my wages being garnished to end the year and look forward to taxes again. And they took it again.
Wow.
So this time it was much worse because that was the last year that I was eligible to receive any sort of credit in regard to my children, being able to file for any of them. So because of that, what they took wasn't as much as before, and I still had outstanding balance with the student loans. So they proceeded to garnish my wages again the following year. So right as it was coming to an end, by that point, I could no longer afford to stay in the apartment because the amount of late fees that they were adding on to me having to pay the rent late, some miraculously an extra $500 was appearing, but it was appearing to give them in late charges.
Wow.
We were, month to month. So I left. And when I left thinking that I was going into a rental home, where we were going to be paying a good $500 less than what our original rent was going to be. And maybe, I think it was actually close to $650. And we were going to go there and I was going to try to save up some money and finally take a look and see what I can do to alleviate some of this excess bills that I have piling up. I owed people as well as I owed bill collectors. I stopped answering my phone basically because of that very reason as well. And only to discover the day I went to move into the home that someone else moved into the home the day before. So apparently I had gotten scammed by a real estate company and a gentleman posing to be the landlord. I had to file a police report, but there was no way for me to get back over $2,000 that I had put down as deposit.
Wow. Oh my
And
God.
so that sent me to a basement of someone that I know. And I'm grateful because it was better than being outside. But the reality is that was not a space that was really meant to be occupied. I slept next to a washer and dryer for almost 2 years in that space. And the turning point for me was when the whole wall had to come out because mold had grown through the carpet on the floor, straight up the wall
Oh my
into
gosh.
yes. And I already had too many health issues that that was not going to be a good turn. And so right when the mold started to grow, excuse me, COVID came along. And thanks to COVID, my job started to determine that they think they wanted to make changes. And in the changes, cuts were probably going to come. And that's when I started to say to myself, I've been on this job for over 10 years and I've never tried to do anything with it. And they say that when you work that long, you should buy a house. That's literally what I told myself. And so I thought, well, before I can buy a house, that means I have to look at my credit. And at this point,
Well, hold on 1 second. So 1 second. So you're saying you, up until this point, you never checked your credit at all? You didn't know what your credit score was? Nothing?
I was petrified because I have been told no so many times for everything that I've ever tried to get. That
Wow.
idea that credit was something that would be available to me was non-existent. I didn't really have any knowledge of credit. I just heard people kept saying credit, but nobody really took the time to explain to me what that meant. It wasn't a reality for me. The only thing I knew was that I was terrified to look at it because the reactions that you get when you try to get something and they tell you no and they give you these looks, it's like, oh man, it must be really bad. I never tried to look.
So that fear of the unknown kept you from even trying to see what it was. Wow.
Yes, I would talk myself out of it every single time. So at that point, I got desperate because by this time, I knew that I had a grandbaby that was going to be on the way, and that was a condition that we couldn't live in. And so I had to just do something drastic. So I decided to check my credit. And when I checked my credit, one of the nicest surprises I got was to discover that all the garnishments ended up paying the bulk of my debt. And so what I actually had left was just a little over $800.
Wow.
So I made the sacrifice. I paid the $800. I even learned to dispute one of them. And it worked out. The truth is, majority of what was sitting there were things that I didn't even know existed. And they had been there for over 20 years. And that is what made my credit so bad. It's just stuff that was because I was negligent and just had no knowledge of when all I had to do was make a phone call. So after seeing how the one dispute went, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to stretch this out any longer. Let me just pay this and see what I can do. And I did that. And I waited.
You paid, sorry, you said you paid what? What did you pay?
Just a little over
the balance that you owed. Okay.
And it was in total, it was 4 different places that came up to about a little over $800. It would have been 5, but I disputed one of them. And so, and they were small, they were not big balances. But I just paid it all off. And I waited 45 days. And in 45 days, my credit score jumped over 100 points.
Wow.
I saw that. I thought, okay, So this is something that can climb and it can move. So I searched around, and I started listening to the different advice of people, different people that I heard talk about credit before. I had another friend in high school that actually does a credit business, and I did a consultation with her, talked to her, and just listened to all the tips that everyone had. And from there, I learned a few things that I could have done, because once all the debt was paid, the problem I had left was that I just didn't have any credit in terms of
Mm.
established credit. I only had bad credit, but when the bad credit went away, it was like no credit was there.
Mm.
Um, I had a
So,
rep- Go
so
ahead.
hold on a second. So this is good. So I just want to make sure I highlight this. So you ended up basically with no credit. So would you say that no credit is just as bad credit, or would you say it's yeah?
No credit is just as bad. Well, in my opinion, I think it was worse, because
Okay.
with bad credit, you can always turn it into good credit, because at least it gives you a history. But
Okay.
no is much harder to build because it takes time to do that. And so I had a family member that literally called me out of the blue one day and said, I was praying and this is what I heard. And they felt that they wanted to add me to two of their credit cards
Oh
as an
wow.
user. And that one little move gave me about 10 years of credit history.
So adding you to their credit as an authorized user helped you. Now that's one of the strategies that I teach people about managing, about improving their credit. So I love that you brought that up. That's awesome. Go ahead
Yeah.
and tell us more about that.
And because these were cards that they have had good history with, and no, they didn't owe anything on it, and they had such years on it, their amount of years ended up becoming my years as well. And so that's what they did. And then I took out a secured card. And now the secured card is funny, because I first had to take it out and then call the bank and then try to find out, okay, so how does this billing cycle work? And they basically told me, wait 30 days. Don't use it yet. Just wait, because if you spend anything on it now and pay it back, it's not going to reflect. What you want to do is they want to see you actually show the work. So show that you've bought something, you've made a purchase, and show responsibility that you're managing what you've bought. So what the gentleman told me at the bank was, it doesn't matter what you purchase, just make sure that it never goes more than 30% over what your actual limit is. And when you go to make the payments, leave $10. Even if you pay everything else, leave at least $10, because what they want to see is you actively utilizing the card. So this month you'll leave $10. Next month you might leave $5. They just want to see that it's increasing, decreasing, but never more than the 30 points. And with that being said, that was really the beginning of a turnaround for me, because what shocked me was that one little secured card, the points just kept on adding up. One month it would be 50 points, another month it would be another 100 points. And all for utilization. I got dinged one time because I didn't use the card one month, and it
Oh wow.
dropped. And I was so upset because I couldn't believe it dropped because I didn't use the card. And
Wow.
so that was a learning curve for me as well. But in total, once I started the process, I started it being debt free. And so because I literally had no old debts to pay, and the living situation was different, I was able to just make purchases, pay them off. And it's not time to do a shopping spree. Just just regular things, but showing that you can manage what you do have. And then once I was able to get my credit score, when I started the process, my credit score is about 510. In total, it took about 4 months for it to jump into the 700.
Wow.
And that was when I decided that I'm going to start the house process. Yeah.
Okay, so at that point, you felt comfortable saying, okay, I want to buy a house. Did you experience any challenges after that when you decided that you wanted to buy a house, or was it like easy peasy after that?
So the challenges, the challenge was mainly the market, because one of the things that they told me, the different people, was my realtor in particular. She said, make sure that when you do start the process, all your credit score, all different TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, make sure they're all within a similar range. And so don't just leave it to one of them to be high and the rest to be low. So that was the first thing that I had to do. And then the market, which I still don't understand a whole lot about, but one thing I realized was houses started to become extremely popular. And for every time I would think I got one or think I found one, I would get there and it would be gone just that fast. And so I learned to pick about 50, but maybe look at 10. It's one of the things I had to do. The other thing I had to do was I created a little bit of a vision board, because I had no idea what I wanted. A house wasn't something I ever imagined. So again, with expecting a no, I never even had that dream. So when they were asking me, well, when you do decide to get a house, what do you want? And the answer was, I don't have any idea. So I look at pictures in magazines and just take a look and see what was out there. And based upon what I saw was how I started to be able to sort of get an idea of the things that I would like. And so I went to go look at a ready-made house, and I just kept getting no, no, no. And there were so many little things that came up, hidden things about these homes that you don't know until you go and inspect it for yourself. But the good news is that when I finally decided to put in an offer, in the end, I ended up putting an offer on an empty lot. It was just dirt.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What was that an intentional move, or did you get tricked, or what was that about?
It was not. But what happened was all these homes, they just kept disappearing. Now there's this mold growing in the home, and we need to get out of there. There was just, I was getting exhausted physically, mentally. And I just felt like we need to desperately get out of here. It's about time. We've been here long enough. It's almost 2 years. I need to do something. So I had to go and get pre-qualified. And in getting pre-qualified, that was what started the journey on what kind of houses I could look for. But everything that I went to look for within that range was just being eaten up quickly. And anything that was available was either maybe $300,000 more than what I was already looking for. So the other thing that I had to consider was taxes. Which areas were going to be more expensive, more reasonable. And in the end, I decided to look at a particular complex that was, still had houses that were coming up and had houses that were already built. And when I went in, they had different models, and the model in particular that I really liked, it didn't exist anymore. So she told me that they have an up and coming model and it would be the last one. But what I could do is take a look at somebody else's home and then go from there. And that's what made me decide to end up getting this lot that was available. Now, just to say, I had seen a couple more new homes, some were even fancier and bigger, and I got pre-qualified for all of them. I was able to qualify for more than I ever imagined was possible to me. In the end, I stayed under the price, but the shock was that I was able to get something that was more than $90,000 because in my head that was the goal, and that was the goal because that was the goal I saw somebody else get many years before that, and I had no idea like what houses cost, how it all worked. So when they qualified me for over 300, I was shocked.
Wow.
I didn't go there, but but the looking at the different homes gave me a great picture of what you get for the money that you'll put out, and how you can cut some of those costs. And in the end, getting a new build ended up working out for me in terms of I was able to save so much more money than if I had ended up getting one of the ones I originally looked at. Because with the ones I originally looked at, the amount of repairs that I would have also had to take on before being able to get comfortable. Whereas we moved into this house and they actually gave me money back. And the money they gave me, I was able to get some things for this house. Yeah.
Wow. This is an amazing story. I almost feel like we need a part 2. But I mean, I just think it's just awesome how, just simple things. It wasn't like anything huge, but just a simple thing like checking your credit score and then, utilizing the things that the bank was telling you to do to build your credit, and also being added to someone else's credit history really catapulted you. I have to say catapult, because from living in a moldy basement to now owning your own home, that is a catapult. Wouldn't you agree?
An incredible. The home I now live in is bigger than the home I was renting the basement from. It's we have 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. There's more room here than I've had in any house I've ever lived in. According to my youngest, he says I have an apartment in the house. But everybody is just spread out. It's just, the space is incredible. And I have some dreams that already came through. I have my prayer room / office, and so much peace here. And so in order to get rid of debt, you have to generate some debt, is one of the things that I learned. You have to be willing to spend a little bit, but you can manage it. You just have to be financially responsible. If I could title this, I would say change your mind, change your whole life. Because that's what I had to do. The first thing I had to do was to get out of the negativity, get out of the negative thinking, get out of always expecting the worst, and just being willing to try regardless of what the outcome may or may not be. And knowing that if the outcome is not the greatest, try again, But the best part for me was that, through much prayer, Father was able to show my sons in particular what hard work, sacrifice, diligence looks like, and the rewards that come from it. Because if anything should happen tomorrow, they have a home. And we're able to see that although mommy said no to the brand names and the expensive things, you guys didn't have cable and we didn't watch TV during the week, but you now have a home.
Right.
And Oh, and I recently made another purchase.
Oh, wow.
I can drive now. I also learned to say yes. 20 years of being afraid to get behind the wheel for one reason or another. And he was able to do that as well. Yeah.
I think that's awesome. This is such a wonderful story because honestly, there's so many people out there, some of them whom I have the opportunity and I will have the opportunity to speak with as a financial consultant and a financial coach and an educator. They feel like they don't see their way through. They want to get out, but they're not sure how it's going to happen. More so for single moms than anyone else, because usually they have themselves to rely on and everything is just kind of stacked up. So it's that stacking up that becomes a little overwhelming. If it's one thing, you could kind of deal with it. But when there's like a stack of things, then it's like, oh, you just feel overwhelmed. So I believe that your story will really encourage someone who's going through, something, even if it's not exactly like you, but something harsh, that they feel like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, or if I'm ever going to get through this. Or like in your case, you didn't even envision that you would even have a house. It wasn't even a part of your dream because you just thought it wasn't going to happen. So there's a lot of people out there that also, they stopped dreaming. Maybe they were dreaming and then they just stopped because it's like, it's not going to happen for me. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, it's just an awesome thing, and hopefully in the future we can check back in with you. How are you doing? Or maybe do another video about another topic, because I'm sure you have more. I know you have more stories. From the bottom of my heart, I just want to thank you, and I hope that this was helpful to everyone. That was such an awesome story, wasn't it? Hearing from Sonia, her story just really gave me like goose pimples, and I hope it did that for you too. If you need help getting your finances in order, don't think that it can't happen for you, because if it happened for her, it could happen for you too. See my information in the description box and reach out to me, and let's see whether or not we can be a good fit to work together. This has been a wonderful time. Remember, like I always say, change your mind, change your pocketbook.